to play upcoming releases like Star Wars Outlaws or Destiny 2 The Final Shape but don't have a PC up to snuff? Well, that's no problem thanks to this video sponsor, GeForce Now, powered by Cloud GG. Play it up to 4K 60 FPS with their new Ultra tier, giving you access to cutting-edge PC performance at a fraction of the price of having to buy the hardware outright. Click the link below to check it out for free or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, what is cracking? Have you had a good week? Have you been kicking back and relaxing in between all these big releases? I sure have. April and May are pretty quiet, so I'm taking things nice and slow, playing way too much Balatro. Man, government should step in and stop this thing getting ported to mobile, because I fear for our future as a productive species once we are all carrying this game around in our pockets. Outside of that, I've been playing Dragon's Dogma, and let me tell you, I got thoughts about that video game. I shared some of them in the most recent episode of the Friends Per Second podcast, the one where the absolute GOAT, Nakey Jakey himself co-hosted the whole episode, and where we interviewed CD Projekt Red about what it was like for them to be building a new studio in Boston. We sneakily recorded that one while we were over there checking out Judas and chatting with Ken Levine. So yeah, it's been a pretty busy couple of weeks, hence me lapping up the downtime, but the news doesn't stop, and that's what you're here for, and I appreciate that. So enough bants, enough foreplay, here comes the news. Speaking of CD Projekt Red, with the final updates made to Cyberpunk and the sequel A Distant Dream, attention now turns to CD Projekt Red's next major release, The Witcher 4. It sounds like a fever dream, the idea of another Witcher game. The last one was of course one of the greatest RPGs ever made, and the saga ended with such fitting finality that it's difficult to imagine how it might continue. But CD Projekt Red have been clear for a long time that The Witcher 4 is on the way. Work began as far back as 2021 and it was announced in 2022. It's still running under the codename Project Polaris with an official title pending, but it's definitely coming at some point, though I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. Recently, CD Projekt Red announced that over 400 developers are now working on The Witcher 4. It's still technically in pre-production, but it hit that 400 staff headcount well ahead of when management had planned, since they expected to be at this staffing level around mid-year. That headcount represents about 2/3 of CD Projekt Red's total staffing, and with that many people working, you can start to make some informed guesses about potential release windows. Most AAA games staffing at or near that level will work for about 4 to 5 years to deliver a game, with those timeframes only getting longer as we get deeper into the current console generation. Based on those numbers, we might expect to see The Witcher 4 revealed in 2026-ish, maybe a cheeky trailer or two in 2027, maybe a release in 2028 if we are lucky. It sounds far away, and it is, but that is the reality of what it means to make big AAA games these days, especially if you're going to do it without crunch, which is something that CD Projekt Red has had a bad track record with, and both staff and management have said they're determined not to repeat those mistakes in the future. CD Projekt Red are also saying that The Witcher 4 is probably going to be rather surprising. Speaking during an earnings call, the CEO Michael Nowakowski said that you shouldn't be expecting just The Witcher 3.5, quote, "When it comes to the risks of innovation elements, making a new game is always a creative risk, especially since we're trying to push new boundaries and explore new fields. That's something we haven't actually done before. This is a pretty broad paintbrush stroke for us, but I can't go into too much detail without actually talking about the game per se. You should not be expecting The Witcher 3 in new clothing of sorts. Of course, we're building on the shoulders of what came before and on what we've learned, but we will be adding new gameplay elements and new mechanics that you have not seen in our previous games. I'd say doing such things is always a risk and not just repeating what was done before," end quote. Interesting sidebar, in the same earnings call, CD Projekt Red were asked about Ubisoft's declaration that they now make quadruple A games, to which CD Projekt Red's head of investor relations responded, quote, "Ours will be quintuple A," end quote. It's kind of funny until you remember the launch date of Cyberpunk on last-gen consoles, where all those A's stood for, this game is fucking broken. I love a good Ubisoft roast as much as the next person, but maybe CD Projekt Red should sit this one out. Switching to Xbox news now, they're definitely going through a bit of a rough patch at the moment, but one thing that is very laudable about Xbox's current approach is their commitment to game preservation. Between backwards compatibility, carefully managing back catalog libraries, and even tools that improve the performance of back catalog titles, Xbox are generally walking their talk when it comes to this stuff. It's not perfect, mind you, their commitment to physical media seems shakier by the day, but it's definitely more commitment than most other platforms are offering, and it's important because with more and more games being dependent on online infrastructure, more and more games are disappearing forever than ever before. Well, it appears as though Microsoft are just getting started with all this stuff, because this week a scoop from Windows Central has revealed that Microsoft have established an internal team devoted to game preservation. The source for this was an email that Xbox's Sarah Bond sent internally, seen by Windows Central. In it, Bond said, quote, "We have formed a new team dedicated to game preservation, important to all of us at Xbox and the industry itself. We are building on our strong history history of delivering backwards compatibility to our players, and we remain committed to bringing forth the amazing library of Xbox games for future generations of players to enjoy, end quote. Windows Central says a public announcement is pending and may come during the Xbox Showcase, which is likely to happen in June. In the same email, Windows Central are reporting that Bond revealed just how well the launch of Diablo 4 into Game Pass went. Quote, "We are integrating Activision Blizzard King titles into our services. We launched Diablo 4 into Game Pass, and Xbox quickly became the #1 platform for Diablo 4 players," end quote. That may seem surprising, but to be honest, it kind of makes sense to me, given that I can't imagine the active Diablo 4 player count is particularly high. It's a pretty good game that I personally enjoy, but it definitely needs some serious core system overhaul. Some of that is coming in an upcoming major content patch, and some more of it will come at the back end of the year when the first Diablo 4 expansion launches. If we assume that current Diablo 4 player counts are kinda low, and then all of a sudden the 25 million Game Pass subscribers get the game for sort of free-ish, I can see how that quickly rockets the Xbox platform to the top of the player count list. Speaking of Game Pass, the next major Xbox first-party release is Hellblade 2, arriving on the 21st of next month. A preview cycle for that just dropped, and it's looking fantastic, exactly as expected. Connected to that though, two interesting tidbits shook out. The first is that the director of the first game, a person by the name of Tamim Antonitis, has left the studio. Polygon noted during their studio tour that he was absent, and after inquiring about it, an Xbox representative confirmed that they had left the studio. Antonitis would later release an official statement on Instagram saying, quote, "Exhausted, proud, and satisfied, I was ready to step off after Hellblade, but stayed on for 2 more years to make sure the foundations were in place to fulfill our mission to craft life-changing art with game-changing tech, which you'll see in Hellblade 2 very soon," end quote. Microsoft say that he was only involved in the early phases of Hellblade 2, and given how great the title is looking, it appears as though it remains in very safe hands. The other thing we learned about Hellblade 2 is that on Xbox consoles, it will be capped at 30 FPS. This was confirmed by GamePro, who spoke to the game's senior VFX director, and they said that this 30 FPS cap was in service of a more cinematic experience. I've never bought that line. I do not think that video games become more cinematic when we cap the frame rates. It sounds like cope to me, but nor do I think that a 30 FPS cap is a deal breaker for many experiences, particularly titles reliant on slower, weightier animations, where the extra frames don't make that big a difference to how the game actually feels to play. I'd like it if I had the 60 FPS option, and I will still have it on PC thankfully, but I wouldn't discount a game like Hellblade 2 on console purely because of that 30 FPS cap. Still, it does continue to strain credulity that the world's most powerful console continues to ship flagship exclusives like Redfall, Starfield, and Hellblade with a 30 FPS cap. Two big trailer reveals this week. The first was for the upcoming Star Wars Outlaws. It's good enough that I think we should take a look at least some of it. Roll it, Stu.
Out here, you live and die by your reputation. You want to survive? Know the players.
You're new to this world.
What's your problem?
Come back when you're not.
This is the latest thing out of Ubisoft Massive, the team behind The Division 1 and 2, and most recently, the fairly well-received Avatar game. The trailer was a little surprising to me, since it seems to have something that no Ubisoft game from the past decade has delivered: a cool story. I'm sort of kidding, mind you, Far Cry's had its moments, and I quite liked Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, but I think we can all agree that when it comes to writing, a disproportionate amount of Ubisoft's output is, to use the technical term, poopy. This though, this seems to have some real story chops and some cool characters and set pieces and setups, and yeah man, I'm actually keen for this. The trailer also confirmed an August 30th release date, which is not too far away, and it's well timed since that window is wide open, not much else releasing around then, at least at this point. You know what else is releasing even sooner than that? That's right, I'm covering it, you knew it was gonna happen, so here it is, Destiny 2, the final shape. Overnight, Bungie released a gameplay trailer for the game and an extended Vidoc, 20 minutes of new gameplay, info dumps, and developers making excited sound effects about all the cool new shit you can do in-game. This is a very, very important reveal for Bungie. Player counts have been absolutely cratering as of late, and the general buzz around Destiny seems to have died down to a barely audible whimper while we await new content. Some of that came today in the form of the Into the Light content update, which brought back a whole host of totally broken, overpowered weapons that Bungie sunset a while ago. Now Bungie are like, fuck it, you want to break the game? Go for it. They didn't stop there though, as the final shape gameplay reveal showcased the new prismatic subclass, which is basically an amalgamation of all of the other subclasses, allowing you to mix and match certain abilities in ways that will open up the build crafting side of the game like never before. In addition to all of that, Bungie added something that we thought we would never get, ever. a new enemy faction, a real one, not just a reskin like the Scorn were all those years ago. 10 years later, at the very end of the Light vs. Dark saga, we have some new enemies to shoot at. Incredible stuff. The Destiny community are very pleased with everything they saw, myself included. The hype is real. For me personally though, I find myself thinking more and more about the future. See, the former game director and the current executive creative director, Luke Smith, took to Twitter after this reveal, and all he said was, "All ends are beginnings." Now that really got me thinking. I've long wondered what Luke Smith has been doing in his role, because he is the executive creative director for the Destiny franchise, and that is a game that already has a game director, the outgoing Joe Blackburn. Obviously, Destiny has commercial partnerships and crossovers, and there's always talks of movies and TV shows and whatever, so I'm sure there's lots of franchise management work that has to be done, but I don't know, Luke Smith is, at his core, a game designer. Is he spending all of his time negotiating contracts for Fortnite crossovers? Maybe, but I don't think so. Then there's this new prismatic subclass. It's hard to wrap your head around if you don't play Destiny, but this really feels like something that you give to people at the end of something, since it looks, at least on face value, kinda game-breaking, and Bungie developers agree. They said repeatedly in the trailer that it feels like you're breaking the game with this subclass. Where do you go after releasing a subclass like that? While you're also tying up your 10-year saga, while you're also saying that you plan to alter the future content delivery model into these like chapter things, which sound inherently less ambitious than the current seasonal drops. I mean, you can probably guess where I'm going with all of this. I'm not saying Destiny 3 is happening, I'm just saying that at this point I would not be remotely surprised if it were. It just makes too much sense, and to be honest, I'd be down for it. Destiny is a fantastic game, but there's a huge amount of benefit in resetting the table at this point, welcoming in new players while trying to address some of the game's core issues like power creep or FOMO or the new player experience or content voting. You can also see how Sony would be very up for a new release with a 3 on the end of it. That is a sellable thing that Sony could take to the bank, and also allows them to have some influence over what the future of this franchise would look like, since they'd get to have a lot of say in how that sequel might be built. It's all just speculation on my part, of course, but this is the feeling I was left with after watching this reveal. Either way, I'm looking forward to concluding my 10-year saga when the final shape drops on June 4th, though I won't get to play it for the first week as I will be away at the Summer Games Fest in LA. Very sad times, but I'll certainly be smashing it the moment I get back. A quick lightning round to finish off. Apparently the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake is alive and well. That's according to Saber Interactive boss Matt Karch. Speaking to IGN, he said, quote, "It's clear and it's obvious that we're working on this. It's been in the press numerous times. What I will say is that the game is alive and well, and we're dedicated to making sure we exceed consumer expectations," end quote. It comes as Saber Interactive was sold to an independent investment consortium, with former owner Embracer Group remaining tight-lipped about who holds the rights to the project after the sale. That's still unclear, but at least we know the remake exists, and to be honest, Saber have a pretty great track record, so I'm low-key excited to see them tool this project up, most likely after they ship Space Marine 2, which is scheduled to drop later this year. Atari just bought the rights to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, not the Roller Coaster Tycoon franchise, mind you, since they seem to already own that. For some reason, they didn't own the rights to the third installment, but after buying it from developer Frontier, they now do. As for what Atari plan to do with it, they say they plan to, quote, "explore brand and merchandising collaborations as part of a long-term plan to bring the franchise to new heights," end quote. Atari has had a very, very patchy relationship to this franchise over the past decade, but new leadership at Atari seems to be riding the ship on a number of fronts. Hopefully Roller Coaster Tycoon comes back strong, because that is a great franchise that deserves to keep trucking. If you're looking for an update on the chonkiest men and women in video games, then mark your calendars, because word on the street is that Gears of War 6 will be revealed soon-ish, most likely at the Microsoft Showcase usually tied to the Summer Games Fest lineup in early June. Xcast Paris Lilly was talking about a cheeky tweet from a Coalition developer, hinting about Gears of War 6 being built in Unreal Engine 5, and in the same show, Jeff Grubb said he heard rumblings about a summer reveal for the game. The Verge's Tom Warren then followed that up by saying he'd heard the same thing, so between all of them, I think there's a pretty good chance we're going to see some new Gears sooner rather than later, which is good timing, because Xbox really need to get some big chunky exclusives out the door, and they don't come much chunkier than Gears of War. Characters, I mean, and the game as well, I guess. Speaking of Summer Games Fest, Ubisoft just confirmed that they will be hosting a showcase attached to all of that. It'll be on Monday, June 10th, and will no doubt contain a look at the upcoming Star Wars game, the upcoming Assassin's Creed Red, and most importantly, the thing we all tune in for each and every year, the Just Dance musical number. Genuinely one of my favorite traditions in the gaming calendar. Long may it rain. Some sales numbers to rattle through quickly. Dragon's Dogma 2 has now sold through 2.5 million units, bringing the series to a total of 10 million. Given the phenomenal out-the-gate success of Dragon's Dogma 2, its sequel is all but inevitable, which is a good thing because I'm playing through it right now and I love it. But man, it's got a lot of broken and missing shit, and that's kind of what I heard people said about the first game. So I don't know. It's a weird one. Content warning: Shadow dropped last week on April 1st and immediately had 6 million people download it. It's now just past 6.2 million downloads, meaning people are actually paying for it, and they seem to be happy to do so, as the title is still sitting at a 91% very positive on Steam and is still producing plenty of gold on social media feeds. Meanwhile, Dwarf Fortress just passed the 800k sales milestone. Not bad for a game that was literally free for like 20 years. To be fair though, this version did get a slight visual upgrade versus the original ASCII art. Finally, there were more layoffs this week because, well, you don't need me to explain why, you know at this point. Embracer Group just sold Gearbox to 2K Games, and it looks like some layoffs were baked into that purchase price because Embracer let go of an undisclosed number of Gearbox employees. A statement from Gearbox says the roles were, quote, not tied to the development of Gearbox software games, end quote, without specifying what that meant. And you absolutely cannot trust words like that, since more often than not, senior management will say shit like, QA is not a core part of the game development process. It's unclear if Embracer will provide further information on what these layoffs entailed, but I think it's highly unlikely. Last one, Relic Entertainment went independent last week, breaking away from their previous owner Sega. The move came with layoffs, sadly, with Relic letting go of 41 people. The studio released a statement saying, quote, letting people go was not an easy decision and was made solely with the goal of providing Relic the best chance to survive in an increasingly volatile industry. It does not in any way reflect on the expertise, passion, and character of any of the impacted employees, end quote. An all too familiar refrain at this point. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, the director of Dragon Age Inquisition, a guy by the name of Mike Laidlaw, he left BioWare and partnered up with a number of veteran AAA game developers to form a new studio. The studio was called Yellow Brick Games, and they've been at it for some time now, though we never knew what they've been working on. This week, they reveal what they've been working on. It's called Eternal Strands, and it's a third-person action melee game with a little bit of physics stuff, a little bit of monster climbing, and a whole lot of Fortnite visuals. Yellow Brick described it thusly, quote, at the heart of Eternal Strands beats a revolutionary new system for gameplay interactions. Heat spreads, cold chills, and real-time destruction allows for unprecedented reactivity in combat, end quote. Personally, this reminds me at least a little bit of Immortal Phoenix Rising, and since Ubisoft won't ever give us a sequel for that game, I guess I'll have to settle for this one instead. There's no release window for it yet, so don't expect it anytime soon. Here's one that looks particularly excellent. Crush House is the latest thing from Devolver Digital, developed by Nereal, makers of Reigns and the recent Card Shark. They're describing it as a thirst-person shooter. Very clever. It's one where you play a reality show producer in a Big Brother-style house, curating conditions to maximize the drama. This isn't just a sleazy version of The Sims, mind you. The Sims is sleazy enough as it is, thank you very much. No, Crush House also has something sinister lurking under the surface, as all is not what it seems to be in this Mojo Dojo Casa house. Crush House doesn't have a release date yet, but it will arrive sometime this year. Instruments of Destruction is one I've been tracking since it launched into early access last year. Remember Blast Corps from way back in the Nintendo 64 days? Well, this is probably the closest thing we've seen to it since. It's a game about using vehicles to destroy as much as possible in as little time as possible. The game utilizes a really sophisticated destruction model that goes super hard when you hit the right load-bearing pillars. During its early access period, the reviews have been excellent the entire time. It's currently sitting at 94% very positive on Steam. The team just announced a release date for 1.0 and it'll arrive on May 10th exclusive to PC. Scold Against the Black Priory is going straight for those nostalgia berries. It's a PC RPG looking to channel the feel of classic stuff like Ultima. This actually has a fair amount of buzz around it from the old school PC RPG folks, and the trailer is mighty impressive to boot. It's from indie label Raw Fury, who generally maintain a pretty strong track record. It arrives on May 31st exclusive to Steam. Front Mission 2 Remake arrived for the Switch last year. Great reviews for it. The original for this never actually released in the West, so that Switch release was more than just a straight port or remake. The game is now headed to other platforms, and on April 30th you'll be able to play it on PC, PlayStation or Xbox, and there's actually a Steam demo up right now that will carry your progress over to the full game. And finally, biggest announcement of the week is that Nightmare Cart has an official release date. The title actually had a release date earlier, but Sony politely requested that all reference to Bloodborne be scrubbed from the game before release, and the developer was only too happy to accommodate, since they were just glad that Sony didn't pull a Nintendo or a Rockstar and shut the whole thing down. Don't worry though, Nightmare Cut is still unmistakably Bloodborne, only without the threat of a DMCA strike hanging over it, and it is still free. It'll arrive for free on May 31st, PC only. So what came out last week? Well, Biomorph released exclusive to PC. This is that hand-drawn Metroidvania with a lot of Hollow Knight energy. Only a handful of Steam reviews out for this one so far, but they're 90% very positive. Tough to find critic reviews for this one, actually. There's literally only one up at the time of writing, and it's from Slant Magazine. They scored it a 60, saying, quote, Biomorph itself sometimes seems like a group of cyborg dogs and ghostly farmers. Cool ideas stitched together, lumbering about in search of more purpose than find and reactivate 4 generators, end quote. Bit of a strange write-up, not exactly a stirring endorsement. Maybe wait for a few more reviews to roll through if you're eyeing this one. Botany Manor is that first-person garden simulator and puzzle game where you serve as a groundskeeper in the Victorian manor. This one is meant to be pretty damn fantastic. No Steam reviews out yet at the time of writing, but the review embargo broke overnight and the game is sitting at a mighty 84 on OpenCritic, 100% of critics recommending it. IGN scored it an 8, saying, quote, clever cues entwined with Botany Manor's charming Old English setting to make for a light-hearted first-person puzzler worth tending to, end quote. Press Start also really enjoyed it. They scored it an 8.5, saying, quote, Botany Manor is a delight. It's sweet, succinct, and serene, packed with clever puzzles that reward thoughtful exploration and engagement with its narrative. At a little under 3 hours, it's the perfect lazy weekend getaway for those that like to stop and smell the flowers as much as they like to enrich the soil of their mind, end quote. A nice little surprise, that one. If you're at all interested, it's available on the 10th, but there's a demo up for it right now on Steam, allowing you to try before you buy, and perhaps more importantly, this is on Game Pass. So yeah, very easy to get your hands on this one. Children of the Sun arrived exclusive to PC yesterday. Been banging on about this one for a while now, and that's because it rules. You play as both a sniper and the bullet, positioning yourself for the first shot and then controlling the bullet itself after that. It's kind of like Superhot meets Sniper Elite with the grungy aesthetic of Hotline Miami and the dirgy soundscape to boot. No reviews out for this one at the time of writing, but Austin did play it and review it, link below the like button. Austin really enjoyed it. It's very much what it says on the tin, a clever action puzzler with a core gameplay loop that gets more interesting as time goes on, but it does have a cap that stops it from reaching the greats of stuff like Hotline Miami or Inscription or the recent Balatro, games with a hook so deep, so surprising, and so addictive that they forever burn themselves into your memory. Still, Children of the Sun delivers exactly what you might hope, and at a 6-hour runtime with plenty of replayability courtesy of leaderboards, there's plenty of bang for buck in that modest asking price. It also happens to run beautifully on Steam Deck, so feel free to enjoy it there as well. So what's coming out this week? Well, biggest release of the week, in my humble opinion, is Broken Roads from developer Drop Bear Bytes. If you've played Disco Elysium, then you might be interested in this one, as it too is a narrative-led RPG that's more about the talky than punching on, as we say here in Australia. And that matters because Broken Roads is set in Australia, a really beautiful rendition of outback landscapes and townships. The sort of setting that you just don't see in video games, because who sets a game in Australia? Other than the time that Forza Horizon did it, which was actually pretty cool. Broken Roads has had a very, very patchy road to release. They were initially published by Versus Evil before that outfit went belly up, so now they're being published by Tiny Build. They also released review code a while ago before recalling it, saying they needed more time to work on the game and fix critical bugs. They've had that time now, so hopefully this thing is rip raring to go. Again, something we say here in Australia. It's arriving exclusive to PC on April 11th. We'll check back in on the reviews next week. Let's Revolution is a vibrant roguelike puzzle game, not unlike Minesweeper, but with an even better story. Don't sleep on that Minesweeper lore, by the way. Let's Revolution was nominated for Game of the Year at last year's South by Southwest convention in Sydney. It's got an OpenCritic score of mighty 90, and it got that score because it released on PC last year, but on April 11th it'll hit all consoles. Speaking of console ports, Grounded arrives on the Switch and the PS4 and 5 on April 16th. You guys know the story with this one already, so no need to rehash it. Fantastic game, arguably one of Microsoft's best exclusives for this generation, exclusive no longer. One more console port to round things out. Planet of Lana is a really gorgeous narrative platformer with a wonderful soundtrack. It was previously exclusive to PC and Xbox, but on the 16th it'll arrive for PlayStation and Switch. Cozy game fans, Whisker Waters is for you. It's a cute little cat game about cute cats doing cute cat things. It arrives on all platforms bar the Xbox on the 16th. VR headset owners, a new video game has arrived. I phrased it that way because VR game releases are feeling fewer and further between at the moment. This one is called Soul Covenant, and it's a first-person melee melee action game. It does seem to be a lot of stuff to hit on screen, kind of like a first-person VR Dynasty Warriors game, but set in the future. Actually, come to think of it, a VR Dynasty Warriors game would go pretty hard. They should make that. Anyway, this one's out on April 18th for all VR platforms. Final release for the week is one to keep your eye on. It's called Harold Halibut. It's a narrative-led experience that doesn't seem to be doing much in the gameplay department, but visually it's quite striking, bringing back the stop-motion claymation thing that used to be all the rage back in the days of stuff like Neverhood. That was a fantastic game, by the way. Harold Halibut had a demo up during the recent Steam Next Fest, and it met a good reception. This one's out on April 16th for all platforms bar the Switch, and it's also day one on Game Pass. I literally squealed the first time I saw this one, so put this on your radar. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the greatest driving game of the entire 16-bit era, that being Micro Machines, but your boy certainly remembers, and honest to God, they were some of the best times I had playing games with my brothers, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. Whoever dies gets off, youngest brother gets the Mad Catz controller, because as the eldest, the first-party controller was my birthright. Micro Machines was a game in and of its time, but all these years later, it seems like someone believes that that time should come again. This is Tiny Tires from solo developer John Christensen. It is unashamedly Micro Machines in all but name. It's top-down, it's high contrast and high color, it's racing around a goddamn billiards table. I mean, need I go on? The core of the gameplay seems to be totally intact as well, with a very physics-led gameplay model that prioritizes precise positioning and drift over things like speed boosts and power-ups. It just looks so damn perfect, and there's absolutely no way that I'm not grabbing this one the moment it launches and leaving it permanently installed on my Steam Deck. If this one interests you as much as it does me, then you may want to wishlist it, and to make that easy, I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and it being the second week of the month, you can grab your PS Plus stuff since it is now live. Speaking of PS Plus, some additions to the PS Plus Premium catalog, not the Essential. Dave the Diver was one of the best games of 2023, and it joins the Premium tier on April 16th, and the brand new upcoming Metroidvania Tales of Kenzaru Zao will also be joining as a day one release when it launches on April 23rd. Studio boss and project lead Abu Kabar Salim was very excited to announce that on Twitter this week. Definitely don't miss Epic's epic haul this week. Right now you can still grab the sort of okay Thief from 2014, as well as the rather excellent Outer Worlds Space's Choice Edition, which includes both of the very worthwhile DLC. All of that for $0.00. Not a bad deal. It gets even better though, because later this week, those two will be replaced by the top tier parkour action game Ghost Runner. Not the first time Epic has given this away, but hey, if you missed it, this is a second chance to grab it, and if you end up liking it, don't forget they released a sequel last year as well. Game Pass got its refresh, but we covered that off last week. Don't forget to check out both Botany Manor and Harold Halibut, which are launching day one into Game Pass. Finally, Amazon Prime Gaming's April lineup is pretty solid. Right now you can grab MMO Black Desert Online, as well as the often hilarious Chivalry 2. Next week they'll be giving away Fallout 76. They say you can't look a gift horse in the mouth, but I don't know about that. It is well timed though, since the Fallout TV show premieres on Amazon Prime later this week, and the show is meant to be pretty good. Initial reviews are definitely positive. I'm going to check it out for myself and let you know what I think next week. Our feel-good story for the week is, I don't know if it's feel-good, but it's definitely funny, at least a little. Recently, Tekken boss Harada-san shared some interesting thoughts on young people and why he thinks they prefer team sports over 1v1 style competitions. Speaking to the AIAS Game Maker's Notebook podcast, Harada was speaking to the former Sony boss, Shuhei Yoshida. During that podcast discussion, Harada posited that young people prefer team sports these days because when they fail, they've got someone to blame. It's a long quote, but it's worth it, so stick with me. Ready? Quote, "In Japan, and probably in most of the world, my generation is a big one. It makes up a good chunk of the population. That made our society a competitive one. If you applied to a school or for a job, there was always a lot of competition. Because of this, people in my generation prefer definitive outcomes, a clear winner and loser. This applies to folks in and around their 50s, but most young people nowadays are the opposite. They're rarely eager to engage in one-on-one showdowns. Plus, because fighting games pitch you by yourself against a single opponent, you have to accept all the responsibility if you lose. You can't blame anyone else. In team-based shooters, when players win, they can say that they won because of their own contributions, but when they lose, it's because they got matched with a lousy team," end quote. And as someone who's played my fair share of League of Legends and Overwatch, I gotta say, maybe the man has a point. Yoshida certainly thought he had a point, since he added, quote, Some games even give out individual awards to every player, end quote. I don't know what you guys think about this. Do you actually think this is true? Like, I've never thought about it in this way, but it doesn't sit right with me. It kind of comes out like this generation is soft, except instead of talking about walking 6 miles to school, it's about which video games they choose to play. Let me know what you think about this. For real, it's kind of interesting, so leave a comment below. And if you're still here and you enjoyed yourself, then I'd love it if you could also drop the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and ding that notification bell if it is unrung. Anime nerds, we got that Sandland preview up on the Patreon if you want to check that one out, as well as a preview for Visions of Mana. Edmond was invited to check out both of these at the Bandai Namco office last week. We weren't able to do a video on those, so we wanted to host those impressions somewhere. They're on the Patreon right now, free to all, no paywall, so please knock yourself out. I'm gonna go back to playing too much Dragon's Dogma, 35 hours in, and this game has got its hooks into me very deep. You take care of yourselves, thanks for stopping by, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, GeForce Now, powered by Cloud GG. Alright Australians, this next part is for you. For me personally, PC gaming is where it's at. The 30 FPS cap on console games, I am not about it. When I play, I want 60 FPS or more. When I play a shooter, I want a keyboard and mouse, and depending on what I'm playing, a bit of ultra-wide action is also nice too. But I'm well aware that the costs associated with PC gaming are not cheap. Buying a top-end machine will set you back thousands of dollars, and that's just a fact. But what if you could get all the benefits of PC gaming at a fraction of the cost of having to buy a high-end rig? Well, you can get those benefits at that fraction of a cost thanks to this video's sponsor, GeForce Now powered by Cloud GG. We've had GeForce Now powered by Cloud GG for a while now, and it's always been fantastic because it's the most affordable path into PC gaming, completely removing both the upfront costs and the ongoing costs associated with maintaining and upgrading your machine. If you're unfamiliar with it, GeForce Now is a powerful gaming platform that lets you play hundreds of games through the power and magic of the cloud, meaning you can play those games on your TV, your old outdated PC, your tablets, and even your Apple devices. This is possible because GeForce Now does all of the graphical processing in the cloud and just beams you an image, similar to something like Netflix. So if you have an internet connection at 15 megabits per second or higher, you can start playing games through the cloud on almost any device through either a dedicated app or through a web browser like Apple Safari. GeForce Now has been around for a few years now, and the thing is, Nvidia and Cloud GG have never stopped improving it, both in relation to the games on offer and the technology that makes all of this possible. Every Thursday, new games are added to the service. In the month of March alone, they added 30 new titles, including Diablo 4, Overwatch 2, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and my personal favorite, Dragon's Dogma 2. And that's just stuff that's already out, when there's always exciting stuff to look forward to, like Destiny 2's Final Shape expansion due out in June, and Star Wars Outlaws, which has just been confirmed for an August 30th release date. GeForce Now powered by Cloud GG has an all-new Ultra Tier membership that gives you access to 4K 60 FPS or 1440p at 120 FPS. That 120 FPS number is significant because many modern TVs support 120 FPS, so you can play Diablo 4 on your TV at that frame rate if you want to, without needing to spend hundreds of dollars on a console or thousands of dollars on a high-end PC. That Ultra Tier also supports ray tracing, and Star Wars Outlaws is confirmed to support ray tracing when it launches. With GeForce Now powered by Cloud GG, you can enjoy those advanced settings without having to spend like $5,000 on a new PC. Best of all, you don't have to buy your games twice. These games are pulled from your existing libraries, be it Steam, the Epic Store, or Ubisoft, meaning that you can continue to buy games wherever you please, but play them through the power and convenience of GeForce Now. There is a free trial available all the time, allowing you to test this for yourself, and for less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can get a full month of the basic tier membership, giving you the chance to stream games on the fly with ease. If you find yourself loving it and using it often, you may want to check out that Ultra Tier, giving you next-gen features like ray tracing, 4K 60 FPS, and ultra wide. PC gaming is, I think, the best way to go about it, but the cost of entry is often intimidating, and you have to worry about upgrading your hardware and troubleshooting issues, etc. If you want to get into PC gaming without any of the cost or hassle, then GeForce Now is absolutely the way to do it, allowing you to play hundreds of PC games with ease. You can try it for free by clicking the link below. Thanks GeForce Now powered by Cloud GG for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.